In this video, I'm going to show you how to configure a President Lincoln II radio for repeater operation. I'm making this video because the user manual is not very clear and it took me a while to figure this out. So even though this radio is no longer in production and there's probably very few people actually using it on repeater systems, this might be helpful to somebody at some point in time. So here we go. I'm not going to get into repeater operation and terminology, so if you need a crash course on repeaters, you can look that up yourself. This is just going to be showing you how to configure the radio. For this example, the repeater has an output frequency of 29.66 megahertz and no tone, which is typical for repeaters in the US. It has a negative offset direction and an offset of 0.1 megahertz, which is standard for repeaters on the 10-meter band. And that gives us an input frequency of 29.56 megahertz. We also need to set a input tone using CTCSS at 107.2 hertz. Now this radio does not display CTCSS or DCS tones directly, so we need to look in the back of the owner's manual, and we find that a CTCSS tone of 107.2 hertz is represented by tone number 14 on the radio. So we need to set tone number 14 on the radio to generate the correct tone for the input of the repeater. Before you do anything else, you're going to need to change one of the menu settings to allow for a different CTCSS tone between the transmit and the receive. So to do that, we're going to go into the main menu by pressing and holding the menu button. And then we're going to use the channel up-down buttons to find this menu called CDT set. And right now you can see that it is equal. If I turn the knob to unequal, that's what we want. That's going to allow us to have a different tone for transmit than receive. And as you can see, it automatically exits the menu after you wait a few seconds. If we go back in there by pressing and holding on the menu button again, we can see that it's still set to unequal, which is what we want. The first step is to set the mode of the radio to correspond with the repeater. This is an FM repeater, so I'm going to press the mode button and change the mode of the radio to FM, which you can see right there. The next step is to set the output frequency of the repeater, which is 29.66 megahertz. We can do that with the tuning knob. You'll notice when I press on the center of the knob, it moves the bar underneath the digits of the frequency display. So I can move it there and then use the knob to tune to 29 megahertz, and likewise set the remaining digits to get the frequency that I need. Now we're going to turn on split operation, which allows you to transmit and receive on two different frequencies. You do that by pressing on the split button, and you'll notice it says split on in the frequency display. That'll disappear after a few seconds. Now we can specify the offset direction and the offset amount by entering the split set menu, which is accessed by pressing and holding on the split button. You can see underneath there it says split set. So if we press and hold on that, it enters the menu. There are two items in this menu that you can access by using the channel up and down buttons. One of the items is the split direction. The other item is the offset amount. So one of the things about this menu is that if you don't do anything for a few seconds, it exits the menu. So if you want to stay in the menu, you need to make sure that you stay active by either cycling between the two items or adjusting one of the items with the knob here. So you can see I'm in the split direction menu, and here I can select either minus offset or positive offset. So this repeater has a minus offset, so I'm going to go ahead and select a minus, and then I'm going to press and hold the memory store button to lock that in there. And now it went to the next menu item, which is the offset amount. And I already have the correct offset amount in there. And you can see that as I change this, it changes the offset amount. And as I change that offset amount, it actually shows you what the input frequency of the repeater is going to be. So you can see with this set to 1000, which represents 0.1 megahertz, it shows the correct repeater input frequency of 29.56 megahertz. If you haven't configured this menu before, it's going to be kind of tricky and kind of annoying. You just have to play around with it, because probably what you're going to see is everything here is going to be zeros, and you're going to have just a 1 there on the right side. And as soon as you try and set that to a 0, it changes the most significant digit there to the maximum offset value. So what you need to do is just put a 1 there in the least significant digit as a placeholder, and then put zeros there until you can get to that digit and set that to 1, and then cycle back around to the first digit there. I went too far, so I'm going to go back around again. Okay, and now set that to 0. So now we've got that. I'm going to press memory store to lock that in. And so now we have the correct offset direction and offset amount. To verify that, we're going to go back into the menu by pressing and holding on the split button. So that's correct, and that's correct. So you can see the input of the repeater, 29.56. The offset direction is negative. Everything looks good there. We'll wait a few seconds. It exits back out of the menu, and we still have the correct repeater output right there, 29.66. Now we're going to set the tones for both the input and output of the repeater. The way it's done on this radio is you first have to set the output tone, which in this case there is no tone, so I'll show you how to do that. And then you move on to setting the input tone, which we do have an input tone. And if you recall, we need to use tone number 14 that corresponds to an actual CTCSS tone of 107.2. So to do that, we're going to use this CTCSS DCS menu, which is underneath the mode button. So we're going to press and hold on the mode button to get into that menu. You can see there it says DCS CTCSS off. If I move the tuning knob clockwise, it goes into the CTCSS tone numbers. And if I move the tuning knob counterclockwise, it goes into the DCS numbers. So in this case, we're setting the tone for the output of the repeater, and this repeater does not have an output tone. So we want to leave this to the off setting and press and hold the memory store button to lock that in there. Now you can see it says TX, so that's asking us to put in the transmit tone, and this is where we do need to put in tone number 14 so that the radio transmits 107.2 hertz during transmit. So we're going to move this to CTCSS 14, press and hold memory store. Those two tones are now set, or rather the one tone on the transmit. So again, to confirm, we'll go back into the CTCSS DCS menu by pressing and holding on the mode button. That's correct. It says off on the receive, and it says 14 CTCSS on the transmit. So those tones are set up and ready to go. At this point, the radio is pretty much ready to go. All you need to do is adjust your RF power, squelch, mic gain, and maybe a few other things. Keep in mind, if you are going to be transmitting on ham radio frequencies, that you need to be licensed. You should also turn off features like Roger Beep and Echo, which are not appropriate for ham radio. I hope you found this useful and more clear than the owner's manual. Thank you.